George Kittle, some interesting comments really make you wonder, how are the 49ers preparing for the end of a past era, turning the page to a new era? Guys like George Kittle, when could it be over for him? Trent Williams, even sooner for him possibly, and the standard for the San Francisco 49ers on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Coach Crocky. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love and appreciate all the everydayers out there. Thanks for hanging with us as we get ready for the 2025 season. Lots of great content to come here, prepping for camp previews, position by position, rivals weeks coming up as well. We got to know your enemy, know the division opponents for the San Francisco 49ers. Today, though, we are going to start with an interesting, it's always interesting with George Kittle when he gets a mic in front of him. They're doing tight end U this week in Nashville. And it's always really cool to hear about that and see how the old guard helps out the young guard. And you got Greg Olson there as like one of the ex-player coaches. And you got Jeremy Shockey was one of the players involved there as well. But Croc, you wanted to bring up some of the interesting comments that George Kittle kind of said about himself and when he thought his career might be over, which was good and bad because on one hand, he didn't sound like he's ready to hang him up anytime soon. But on the other hand, you realize, gosh, this guy's in his 30s. And it could end pretty quickly. And we remember going through all these, and we talked a little bit about it just now off the air too, going through all these quarter-century players and looking at past regimes. You look at a player and you're like, oh, Shante Spencer, he was a really good player for a long time. Oh, man, he played all the way to 2011. What happened after that? And it's like, oh, he played one more year and that was it. And it's like, boom, boom, and you're gone. And like how quickly this can all end for players, good players, bad players, guys retiring, seemingly while they're in their prime too. Hall of Fame players for the 49ers, guys like Patrick Willis, and how quickly it can all end. And on one hand, you didn't feel like George Kittle was going to hang him up anytime soon, but then it makes you wonder, what's the plan, right? Like, what is the plan for the 49ers to prepare for the future and for potentially not having George Kittle around, not having Trent Williams around, because that's going to happen even sooner than George Kittle, I would think, with him potentially hanging him up. Running backs, you never know how long that's going to last. And the bigger question with all of it, Croc, is can you even prepare for that in the NFL with the roster, the money constraints? Like, do you worry about it when you worry about it? When it comes up, a guy retires, say, okay, well, now we have to replace him.
I think we've seen a couple of examples of this in Detroit, right? With you had Calvin Johnson, you had Barry Sanders, right? Two guys that kind of retired what felt like in their prime. You think a guy like Jerry Rice, who plays 20 plus years in the NFL. Then you look at Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson, two guys that were very dominant. Barry Sanders kind of considered arguably the best running back, depending on who you have, or a lot of people's favorite running backs that they got to watch, and different and for different reasons. And I think one is closer to George Kittle, and maybe George Kittle should be closer to the other one. All right. George Kittle is closer to Barry Sanders, a guy who feels good and is like, I could play forever. Calvin Johnson, banged up, body hurting, like, I'm just not doing this anymore. And these are guys that didn't play for a really long time, but retired for very different reasons. If I'm George Kittle, made a lot of money, he's already into his 30s, he's played some great football, especially for his position. How much longer do you want to play? And he kind of talked about it. He's like, when it hurts to put my pants on, or my wife tells me I'm no good anymore, I'll hang him up. But until then, I just want to keep playing football. And I definitely respect that. But man, I wonder what it would be like to be in your early 30s and be retired. And I think a lot of people hear the word retire for sports, and especially for these like mega superstars, where you don't think about anything past that, right? But there's a whole lot of life left when you're early 30s and you retire from something. Like, what do you do if you're George Kittle and you're in your early 30s? You say, you know what, like, this is all I know, let me just keep playing football.
It's got to make your head spin because most people are barely getting their career on track and still achieving and still climbing the ladder at whatever their profession is in their early 30s, right? Forget
That's
late
got to be
20s.
most of our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, me for sure, Croc. I know the same for you.
Yeah.
Like you're not getting things really going until you're deep into your 30s, and you're like, okay, now you're finding and it takes a long time to build that in most professions, and that's why most athletes have to do something, or else idle hands do the devil's work, as they say. You see some post career lives go very haywire in some weird directions when they don't have that anymore. And I got to imagine it kind of makes your head spin. Interesting you brought up Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders, because I think you're right. Because Calvin Johnson was more like Patrick Willis. And do you remember what Patrick Willis said when he retired? He just, because he had that foot injury, and I think it was his foot or was it toes, right? And he was basically like, I want people to be wowed. Be like, wow, look at the way he moves, the way he runs. He didn't want to just hang on and be like a pretty good player. And he could have been a really good player for a long time. But he's like, I liked wow.
Think Julio Jones at the end of his career. When
right.
Like, that's not Julio.
Yeah, that's not the same.
Quantarius, or Julio. Julio Jones. His name not even Julio.
It's not. That's such a great name, Julio Jones, man.
No, and it is nowhere in his name. It just came up out of nowhere. His name is like Quantarius something Jones.
Come on,
but there's
it's not even
Julio.
his middle name.
No,
I didn't know that. Wow. Okay, yeah. You learn something every day.
Julio Jones. Whatever he was at the end of his career, there's some people that don't want to be remembered for that.
Yeah, I can't blame him. Especially you've already made a lot of money. You got a legacy. But some people just love the game and want to keep playing. And I get that too. I go out, play slow pitch softball every Monday because I love playing. I just like being out there running around. Right. And luckily nobody's like filming it and showing it to the world, because I don't know if I'd want that film out there a lot sometimes. So, but yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And I think with George Kittle, it's not something you should need to prepare for, but we've kind of been critical about the 49ers not really preparing for the future of life without Trent Williams and what that might look like. But this day and age, Croc, can a team even prepare for it? Is it even smart to prepare for that? Or should you just be all in when you can be all in and worry about retirements, worry about injuries when they come up, and try to have some depth? Like, can you truly prepare for it?
I think you can try to prepare for it, but I mean, we've seen you just never know if a player is going to be a hit or not. I think just throwing those resources at that position and trying to find some type of contingency plan. We talked about it this year with the 49ers at, pick 11? The 49ers picked that?
11, yeah.
Yeah. So Tyler Warren, would that have been a good pick? You want to talk about preparing for life after George Kittle? Maybe it's, drafting a guy like that where, hey, this year it's a luxury. The next 2 years, maybe you kind of need that guy, But if you don't do it that way and you just, all right, third round, you're going to draft the Cam Latu or Cameron Latu, like the tight end from Alabama.
Yeah, Cam Latu.
Now it's probably not going to work out the way you would hope. With George Kittle retiring, you're going to have to, especially to replace a guy like Kittle, you're going to have to put some big time resources there. Kyle Pitts, a guy who potentially is tradable at the moment, going to get him. It would have to be something like that to prepare for life after George Kittle if you don't want this crazy drop off. There's going to be a drop off regardless.
Yeah.
But if you want something to kind of build on, you would have to draft a guy like Tyler Warren.
I think offensive tackle is, kind of like defensive line, like, whatever, quarterback, like a lot of positions that's a high impact position that's a little bit more scarce. I think those are the positions where you would have to just go in and find that position and try to spend resources on replacing a guy. But I think George Kittle is such a special and unique player that you shouldn't even try to replace him, and you shouldn't even try to replace the position. You should try to get a good tight end, but you would probably start looking at wide receivers or just look at other positions to try to replace that void in that production on your offense, and not necessarily look for another George Kittle type at tight end, because it's probably not going to happen. You're not going to find a unique player like him, and you can find a good tight end, but make up for that difference in another position and try to go find maybe the next superstar wide receiver instead. Maybe that would be the way to go about trying to replace a player like that. When it comes to Trent Williams, an offensive tackle, you got to have an offensive tackle anyway. And so you have to kind of attack that specific position. But with tight end, I don't think
that's what the 49ers try to do with DeForest Buckner. It's like, oh, okay, you lose DeForest Buckner.
Yeah.
That's fine. Go draft Javon Kinlaw. And now you kind of make it a 1-for-1 kind of player thing. And we get it. Oh, you can keep a couple extra guys and you get cheaper at the position. But man, that ain't Buckner who the 49ers got if you were trying to replace him.
One more super interesting comment from George Kittle. And it had to do with an undrafted rookie. And I've got numerous questions about this one, Croc, and especially what it's like to be in a position group and maybe something catches your eye that's not about your specific position. We'll get to that and try to answer the question, what is the standard for the San Francisco 49ers in 2025 and any year? Excuses versus execution and expectations on the field for the Niners next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Monarch Money. Every wish managing money was a little bit easier, felt a little bit easier. With Monarch Money, it can be. They can help so much, whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase. Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. You're trying to buy your first home. Maybe you're just getting your family together. Maybe you've had your family together for a while and your young junior is going to need some money to go to college, or maybe you're looking towards your retirement. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And I mean, having everything in one app is so much easier. Makes it easy for you at Monarch Money. Manage your money day to day, everything you need. And how about managing with your spouse, managing with your partner? Easier than ever. Planning, shared accounts, make it smooth and seamless when it comes to managing money with somebody else. You can do that with Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Isaiah Neyor, out of Nebraska, he bounced around to a few different colleges, 6'4", 210 pounds, 4.4 flat speed, ridiculous athlete. We looked at his tape, not super impressed. I think my main takeaway, short version, was he looks like a guy who plays a different sport. Like, it looks like football's his second sport. That was my initial. And look, this guy played college football for five plus, maybe 6 years. He was in college football. He was in college football for a long time. Had one pretty good year, transferred, had some production, but man, he is a freak athlete. And George Kittle talked about how they're in the tight end room and they're watching this undrafted rookie eat up 9.5 yards with 2 strides. And George Kittle's seen a lot of football. He's seen a lot of players. He's seen a lot of talent come in and out of the San Francisco 49ers building. And he was blown away. And he's like, this guy's too much. Like, this is a stupid athlete, and he's got to at least make the practice squad. So what do you think?
That was interesting.
Yeah.
I have not. You typically don't hear that, right? Like, in the moment, a player comment on a young player who you don't have any control over if this guy makes the practice squad or not. So typically, you don't even put that out there or put those expectations either on the player or on the team to make the decision to keep him, because a lot of times it's a numbers game. And, ideally you would like guys back on the practice squad and whatnot, but it was just interesting to me to hear him kind of, stick his neck out for the guy in that way. And George Kittle, clearly he loves all his teammates. He seems like a great teammate for a lot of those guys. And it seems like he's rooting for all the guys that he plays with. But yeah, that's just something you don't hear that usually, especially from a veteran, to say, oh, he should at least make the practice squad. Like, I can't think of a scenario where I've heard someone say that in a way where it can get posted on social media. Maybe you may be talking to a coach, behind closed doors, like, man, he's got to at least make practice squad, right? Yeah. But just to kind of say that out there and you don't have any control over it, you don't typically hear that.
And I get it. And look, if he didn't play so much college football and he didn't look so rough on tape to me, I would probably have higher hopes because of the height, weight, speed, which is pretty ridiculous that Isaiah Neyor brings to the table. But maybe he just needs a little bit more, and he's a little bit raw, and some time on the practice squad could help him out if he doesn't make the final 53 in the end. But one of the other things that came to mind for me, Croc, when hearing that, and I wanted to ask you about it, what's it like watching tape in your, DB room or in your wide receiver room, whatever it is? And how often do you watch things that aren't your position? Because that was what hit me, is like, that's not really on the agenda, I would imagine, watching some undrafted rookie wide receiver. Like, is there like a fight, something that you're breaking down on tape? You're seeing something weird on the sideline, another position group. Like, is that something that goes on a lot when you're in your meeting rooms with your position mates?
You see all kind of wild stuff that you don't see in real time. You got to remember, like the coach. So first of all, the meeting rooms, they got lower levels like high school, and it might be an entire side of the ball, right? The whole defensive player, they're all watching it with the coach and whatnot. At the NFL level, you may watch some stuff with your coordinator. Sometimes they're going over things, especially like with install. But a lot of times it's just with your position group. So you're in there and you see all kind of wild stuff. A lot of stuff that you don't see in the moment. And there's been plenty of times where, you're actually knowing that something you did was way wrong, and it's going to pop up on film. And the coaches, they got that clicker, and they're rewinding things over and over and over and over again. And when you do something really bad, you just kind of see it playing on loop. And eventually, everybody else will see it as well. And that has happened to me. That's happened to plenty of other guys. That's happened to me, like just watching it as a coach. And I had a player last year where the quarterback rolled out. He threw like a screen. We ended up making a good tackle, but one of my DBs was getting blocked 10 yards downfield. And he just starts wailing on the guy, just hitting him. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you? Now we didn't see it in the moment, but the moment you see it, you have to do something about it. But you see that kind of stuff. I feel like at every level, not so much that was extreme, but just things that you don't notice live. And I'd say watching a guy, a young receiver, cover 9.5 yards in 2 steps, and then to hear him say they rewinded and they watched it about 10 times, I bet that was pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's cool for Isaiah Neyor to hear, and maybe confidence booster. Like, dude, you've got some special ability that you cannot be taught. So work your butt off and learn the stuff that you can learn. And you might have an NFL career, right? Because for someone like George Kittle, an all-pro guy, a Hall of Fame track player, to be that wowed by some of this ability you have as an undrafted guy just because of how you can pick him up and put him down. It's pretty special stuff. So very interesting prospect in Isaiah Neyor. And I thought the film was pretty rough. But, man, again, he does have some unique ability that can't be taught.
Now can he get in and out of his breaks, right? He's covering a lot of ground.
Right.
In a short amount of steps. Can you get in and out of the breaks? Can you drop your weight? Can you change direction? Those are the things that you would really like to see him, be able to do on film.
And that's the downside to that stride, is breaking down and then moving. And then that was what that was what it looked like on tape. When I say it looked like football was his second sport, it looked like track was his first sport, right? With the way he runs, those strides. And he was a former track guy as well. So Isaiah Neyor, interesting prospect. Will he make the practice squad? George Kittle, certainly impressed. Croc, next, let's talk about the standard. What is the standard for the San Francisco 49ers? I think we're out of excuses here for the 49ers to go get that Lombardi at long last. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Rugiette. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra, Cialis, maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiette Ready. Rugiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. And everything's completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet, RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and are not and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. So something that's been on our minds, Croc, since we had talked about, and it's funny, we get a lot of pushback. We talked about it just because the results have been so different with the Kyle Shanahan versus Mike Tomlin thing. Like, the Mike Tomlin teams, they can't win playoff games, but they're always really good. They never sink below 500. Even if they've had some of the worst quarterback play in the league for the last 5 years, they're still a good football team winning 10 games, right? The San Francisco 49ers, on the other hand, have superstars everywhere. They go to NFC Championship game. They go to the Super Bowl. Can't quite get that ring, but then they have seasons like last year where they win 6 games. And they had seasons like 2020 with a bunch of injuries. And I know, and obviously the first 2 years, Kyle Shanahan's career, this was a bare roster and they're really building things up. So I get all that. But at a certain point, it starts to sound like excuses a little bit, Croc. It's like, okay, well, how many stars do you really need? You had your quarterback. You had George Kittle all year. You had a lot of really good players all year long on your football team. And we saw teams with a lot of injuries, and a lot of teams deal with a lot of injuries every single year. Detroit Lions, they were a playoff team. They had a ton of injuries, even more maybe than the San Francisco 49ers. So, yes, they had a lot of injuries, but at what point does it become excuses? And what is the standard for the San Francisco 49ers? Because we're doing the all-quarter century team, and a lot of it ended up being, that team wasn't very good. They weren't good enough. And then you saw guys, players, coaches jettisoned, new guys came in. Harbaugh comes in. It was awesome for a short time, 3 years. And then it was like, what the heck is this? And then gone. And then all the players gone. And then it starts over again, right? And Bill Walsh kind of put the standard out there of what it is for the 49ers. And I feel like some fans have forgotten what that standard is because they want to throw excuses out there for a 6-win team. Even with injuries, the 49ers got to be better than a 6-win team, in my opinion, Croc. And that's not to say that Mike Tomlin's a better coach. He's just the most obvious example, and we keep bringing him up because got no quarterback, and they're still winning 10 games in a tough division. There's no reason for the 49ers to bottom out like they did last year and win 6 games. The 49ers are just a strange team because they're either awesome or not good at all.
When you go back to those 49er teams when they were really good, there was a span of 20 years when they had 10 or more wins, I believe. So it's like during that time, did they never have a crazy amount of injuries? And I think when I talk about it with the 49ers and what they should be able to do, even with some of the injuries, you just rattled off some of the names of guys that played the whole time, right? Like Juwan Jennings. Yeah, he hasn't been a star, but he's been a guy who's in essentially like the 49ers, a starter for the 49ers, third receiver, plays a lot of snaps. You have him out there. George Kittle, all-pro tight end. He's out there. You got your quarterback. He's out there. You look at even on the defensive side of the ball, guys like Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Diamondo Lenore, some of the guys that you're counting on to kind of lead this whole thing, they're out there. So with kind of that kind of supporting cast, again, maybe not expecting a Super Bowl contending team, but like the Pittsburgh Steelers, can you keep it somewhat interesting? Can you keep it somewhat competitive? And I have read some of the comments where people are like, are you settling for mediocre? It's like, no, of course you're not selling me for mediocre, but you shouldn't accept 6 wins. And I think that's where we start talking about a standard. There still should be some kind of standard to where you shouldn't, like you said, bottom out in that manner. Yeah, everybody understands what the 49ers went through last year. And it wasn't just injuries. You got the injuries, you got all the off-season, off-field stuff with what a lot of the players were going through in their personal lives. But like you said, is it excuses? Because I do believe every year you can continue to find different reasons as to why things don't work out the way you want them to for various reasons. And ultimately, when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't think anybody wants to hear it, or nor do they care if the Chiefs have a bad season. You know, the Chiefs said, well, all right, then we just won't have one. And they've had their they lost their running back for an extended period of time. They lost their number one receiver, number two receiver, number three receiver. Travis Kelce is kind of a shell of himself, right? And you
Had a
have
guard
other
playing
areas.
left tackle in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So a lot of different things that definitely can not work out in your favor, but they still figure out a way not only to win a lot of games. I think they won 15 games and still, went to the Super Bowl. Now, again, I'm not saying the 49ers are that, but why is it that a team like Kansas City Chiefs can weather that storm and maximize whatever potential they still have left on the roster? And yeah, I know their defense is better. There's always going to be that but on a different team. The Houston Texans, they had the worst offensive line in all of football. Not even close. It was the worst. They lost Stephon Diggs. They lost Tank Dell, right? Who are they going out there playing with? And they said, you know what? We'll figure out some kind of way to where, yeah, we won't go far, but we're still a playoff team. And while you would like to see more success from them, I know they want to get past the, first round, second round, third round, go to the Super Bowl, all that. Everybody aspires to do that. But you still shouldn't bottom out the way the 49ers do. And I wonder if the standard has dropped a little bit more. Everybody says quest for 6, but it's like, is it all or nothing? Because that's what it seemed like it's been.
I think back to the Walsh era, and you talked about all those years with 10 plus wins and all the Super Bowls, and Eddie DeBarlo still fired Bill Walsh like 3 times, apparently. And then like in the morning, they're like, yeah, never mind. We're not fired. But there was like, that's how competitive they were. And that came from the top down. And I wonder if the 49ers lack a little bit of that, because it felt like it was more like that in the Harbaugh era. Maybe a little strife is good. Maybe they're too kumbaya and everything's just too kosher in the 49ers organization. It's like, all right, you won 6 games. That's okay. Let's still pay a bunch of guys and we're good. And we like you and we're all getting along. There's always been some highs. And again, it's not that anybody needs to be fired, but what is the standard? And I wonder that. And I'm a little bit surprised that there's so many fans that are willing to just make excuses and not even make excuses, because there's good reasons why the 49ers weren't as good last year, right? But a 6-win team, I'm surprised there's not more fans out there that are like, no, that is unacceptable. That can't happen. You can't. With this roster and this team, you can't fall to 6 games. There should be way too much good on this team, even with some injuries. So again, you blame injuries. Okay, well, maybe then the roster wasn't good enough because the depth couldn't handle it. Maybe the coaching wasn't good enough because without the stars, are you a front running roster now? Because now you can't coach up good players. You have to have great players everywhere. So it still brings up questions, even if you think the only reason is injuries. It's not enough for me.
I think I can't remember exactly where I heard it from, but they talked about how, now, the 49ers get a taste of the rest of the league and kind of what they deal with. And it's like, wait, the rest of the league just loses all their star players? And it's like, no, but the rest of the league, or not the rest of the league, but a lot of the league, they don't have the luxury to even have those kind of players. So they're playing with a little bit more of a normal roster and still have to figure it out. And it's like, all right, well, what does it look like now? Now, it's not normal for the 49ers because you don't have Christian McCaffrey, or you don't have, Brandon Ayuk, or you don't have, I'm trying to think who else they were missing. Those are kind of some of the bigger names.
Dre Greenlaw,
right? But yeah, Dre Greenlaw, right? Like, but a lot of teams would tell you they may have like a Dre Greenlaw, but not everybody has a top 7 or top 8 receiver. Not everybody has the number 1 offensive player. More people have a Isaac Guerrero at running back than they do a Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah,
so then,
or Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason was awesome for McCaffrey last year. They ran the ball at a 5-yard clip too. Like, obviously McCaffrey brings a lot to the table that JP Mason doesn't. But most teams, even if they have a Dre Greenlaw, you know what else they don't have? A Fred Warner also. So the Niners linebacker group with Fred Warner and no Dre Greenlaw is better than most teams' fully healthy linebacker groups.
So that's and I think that was a lot of the conversation surrounding Brock Purdy. Like, this is a more quote unquote normal, and not saying normal for a Super Bowl contending team, but for a team that's just you get on the field, right? Like, what are the Tennessee Titans going to look like week 1? They're going to look a little bit more like probably what the 49ers look like without all the superstars.
I think they would.
Now, I could be a little naive. I don't know the Tennessee Titans roster through and through. I know they have a young rookie quarterback, but running with Pollard, at running back, it's cool.
I think the Tennessee Titans don't have anybody as good as even Fred Warner on a bad ankle and George Kittle, and we'll see what Cam Ward looks like. They think he's going to be better than Brock Purdy. We never know with a rookie quarterback, but I think the Titans would kill for the amount of talent the 49ers had while they were banged up last year.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at like a random roster that still figures out a way to, put some things together, and you see them really around the league. Minnesota Vikings, now better offensive line than what the 49ers have. And obviously you have Justin Jefferson, but
they were without Darisaw all year last year. Their left tackle, the Vikings.
Without Darisaw, and even then, I don't think they had the most amazing roster.
I agree.
Like, dude, how many All Pros did they have at their disposal? Good players. Like, I like Jordan Addison. That's a good football player.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the 49ers, he'd be a good football player.
Yeah. He'd be the number 3 behind Debo and Ayuk the last few years.
Yeah.
So just ask the question, what's the standard? What do you think, 49ers fans? Let us know at BD Peacock, at Coach Crocky. Drop a comment on YouTube. And of course, subscribe while you're there. You can find us anywhere you listen to your podcast. Make sure you sub up, helps us out tremendously. And Croc and I will be back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.